ask for permission. Awesome. Yeah. So I will kick us off. My name is Heidi. I am a COTA here at CI, and I have been here since the past 6 years. So I've learned a lot. I see a handful of kids at times. So I'm super excited to talk to you guys more about this tonight. Feel free to ask questions throughout if you want. Ask in the chat if you want to. I don't mind stopping and answering. I would really like it to be interactive. I think that's how I learn best. So I'll let Madison introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Madison Eiler. I'm a speech therapist here at CI, and I'm going to be kind of going over the feeding perspective from the speech therapy side.
What are you doing?
Did I just get kicked out, or is it everybody?
You're back in.
Okay, that was weird. I don't know what happened. Go ahead, Madison.
It's okay. I already introduced myself. I think you just cut out, the internet connection kind of got spotty, but you're back, and I think everybody can hear, so I think we're good to go.
Awesome. All right. So our goals for tonight is to kind of chat through just some basic feeding development that we typically will see, some feeding myths that you may have heard about, kind of chatting through defining picky eating and what food jagging is, and some at-home strategies for success. That is, I think, what everyone's probably most excited about. So I'm really excited to talk about because I love playing. So yeah, that's what we will be kind of chatting through. So we will start with our itty bitties. So around that 0 to 6 months age, breast bottle fed from 0 to 13 months, then we kind of see that progression to thin baby food cereals. When first trying these foods, you may see them spitting that out. That is totally okay. When you think about it, we have to learn how to safely get foods out of our mouth before we are obviously chewing and swallowing, for the sense if it's a safety thing. If you're choking, how do you get the food out? So a lot of times we will teach how to like blow or spit our foods out as part of the progress that we take with different foods as our kids are gaining comfortability with that. So that is exciting. Eating comes first, then comes manners. This is a process, and as we will kind of get into later on, I like to get messy during feeding because that is a great way of exploring. So we definitely teach that, hey, it's okay to get messy while you are playing. We will then discuss, obviously, cleaning our hands, making sure we don't have food all over our face. But getting messy is that first process to learning to eat. And then thin baby purees is like the stage one, baby foods around 6 months. And then we have our 7 to 9 months. We have our thicker baby foods, some cereals, some smoother purees, and then stage 2 baby foods. You have your soft mashable table foods and table food smooth purees. We have your hard munchable. And if you guys have questions based on like what these are, feel free to be like, what is that? Can I have an example? We'll definitely give an example if you don't know already. Hard munchables, these are textured foods for exploring only, not for consumption. So a hard munchable could be like a big long carrot that is out of the fridge that you're learning to kind of chew on, but you're not chewing it and eating it. You are just more so kind of exploring with your mouth what that feels like. A lollipop, some celery sticks, different kind of flavors, different textures, all about the exploration. Once a child can move their tongue around, they can then transition to textured, wow, table food. So some children will stick objects in their mouth and will not need hard munchables at times.
So basically we want it big enough so that the child isn't going to choke. So keep that in mind. That's why like a carrot stick, it's big enough that they can't fit that whole thing in their mouth. You would want a longer carrot stick, just something to kind of get that pattern started. So like Heidi mentioned, hard munchables. So one thing, meltable hard solids, an example would be kind of those puff cereals, because they just kind of melt in the mouth, whereas Cheerios would kind of shatter. So that's just kind of some examples of differences. And then from 10 to 12 months, so these are kind of those softer cube textures, such as like a sweet potato. So it's keeping its shape, but it's getting that tongue and teeth in that kind of munching pattern to start forming the rotary chewing pattern, which is important for kind of those harder solids. Any questions so far? I know we kind of have been flying through the normal, typical feeding. Okay. All right, so 10 to 12 months, again, still kind of that, we're going to start combining textures. So we have the cubes, and then maybe we're going to add in some puree. Something to keep in mind is that before you're mixing things, you want to make sure that kids can tolerate those textures individually first, and then you can start mixing them. So for example, spaghetti, you'd want to maybe try noodles by itself first before kind of going into the full mixing all of those different textures together. We're going to keep going to feeding myths.
Yes. So these are some things that we may often hear, but aren't always true. We'll chat through about 5 of them. And if you guys, again, if you have questions, feel free to ask. This is taken from Dr. Toomey, and she does a lot of the SOS feeding training. That's kind of her program. So this is kind of taken from one of her continuing eds. Children will eat when they are hungry enough. I feel like we hear that a lot, especially they're picky eaters, our grazers, our kiddos who don't always want to sit and eat what the family's having. If you wait them out long enough, they're going to eat it. No, not always. This is true for 95% of the population, but for our children with feeding difficulties or picky eaters, definitely not true. Oh, thanks, Madison, for getting the question. Eating is easy. Something that I learned being a therapist is it is not easy to eat. There's a lot of different things that come of eating. It takes coordination of all of our 8 sensory systems. So when we're thinking about when we are sitting at the table to eat, maybe like, can we support ourselves? Are we sitting 90-90? Is our core supported? If we are moving and grooving at our table, it's really hard for us to focus on putting the food in our mouth and chewing. And then what do we have to do next? So everything is kind of coordinated together. So there's a lot to this other than simply putting food in our mouth, chewing and swallowing. Bilateral coordination, tongue movement coordination, all sorts of different things. So it can be a really tricky thing. So if I give you one takeaway right now with this myth is if you have a kiddo who may have some tricky eating, take a look at their seating. Are they supported with a back? Are their feet on the ground? This can maybe play a huge role into some things here and there. So it's a quick little take home tip for you guys.
And I just wanted to add to, if the child isn't feeling supported, or if that chair isn't like a good option, they're gonna want to stand and move around. So if you, like Heidi mentioned, if you have a child who's kind of grazing or getting up from their seat a lot during meal times, it'd be important to look at their current seating option.
With the first myth, does it also have to do with like cues in their body, like knowing that they're hungry or not hungry?
That can definitely, that can definitely play a role into it. I know that I have goals that are written of like, we'll identify they are when they are hungry. What does it mean to feel hungry? What does it mean to feel,
Right.
what does it mean to feel full? So yes,
Mhm.
this can definitely play a role in you may be you may be really, really hungry.
Mhm.
However, we haven't learned those signals yet
Okay.
to support that. And a lot of our OTs do a lot of great programming, and I'm sure our speech therapists who do feeding as well are very in tune with those interoception skills that we talk a lot about.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we just got a great question in the chat. Jen asked, do you ever recommend belted chairs for older kiddos who can't stay in their seats? This is a great question. I personal opinion, I know we would love to use the belted seats, but I never want the child to feel like they're forced into this opportunity. So we just encourage and give them an opportunity, a seat that fits them well. And Heidi, do you have anything that you would mention about the belted chairs? Any opinions on that?
Mhm. I typically only use a belted chair if I'm using the belt in the Kikaru chair for
Yep.
safety reasons. Again, feeding is so complicated, and I think it's going to be definitely hey, why are we not sitting? Is it because we can't control our body, or is it because we just want to keep moving? If it's because we want to keep moving, then we can maybe think about other options of sensory needs that, hey, maybe we just need to do this, or maybe we need to stand. Each kid is unique in what they need and what they crave. So definitely taking a look. But again, I would say with the belted chair, it makes me a little bit nervous because I want feeding to be fun and enjoyable. And so I would not always maybe go that route.
Stephanie, great question. What options are out there for foot support at the table? So we're mentioning fancy chairs like the Kikaru chair, but really you can use whatever you have. So I've done like one of those plastic bins. The ideal optimal seating is 90 degrees. So look, kind of picture it, visualize it in your head. So the feet are firm on either the floor or a box or some sort of platform so that they're forming 90 degrees with their knees, and then again 90 degrees kind of at your hips, and so that your back is supported. So we've used like a stool before to kind of support those feet if it's an older kiddo, or a plastic bin and just flipped it over. So you can kind of get creative.
We've used like phone books, and we've like duct tape phone books up together, depending on like what that looks like. So definitely get creative on this, and usually you have at your house, like those are the best kind of tools. Those are great questions. Oh, go ahead. Okay. Food myth number 3: you shouldn't touch or play with your food. This is, I feel like, something that I grew up knowing, like, oh, don't play with your food, don't do this. So learning this has been an eye opener for me, and I love it. This is my favorite part of my job. Is I love playing, and I love playing with my kids and allowing them to get messy and just explore. That is how you get comfortable with the foods that are present. Even just letting the food be on your plate is a huge first step, or touching it or letting it touch your face or your cheek. So this is that you will see a lot in our sessions. A lot of play, a lot of getting messy, a lot of just being creative, before we're actually sometimes putting the food in our mouth and chewing and swallowing. If your child does not eat, it is equal to a behavior problem or an organic problem. According to Dr. Toomey, a child will learn behaviors that allow them to avoid sensations they do not like or manage. I think we avoid things sometimes because we know we don't like them, but they are not eating because they're choosing not to. There's something that it's going on that they're not comfortable with. And that's the fun part of solving that piece of the puzzle of how can we support those underlying sensory maybe or oral motor needs.
All right, so now we're going to be kind of talking about picky eating. What is it? and then also talking about problem feeders and the difference between the two. All right, so picky eating. What do we consider a picky eater? So this would be a child who has a food range less than 30 foods in their diet. So if you look at everything that they're eating that's less than 30 foods, they would be considered a picky eater. Sometimes our picky eaters, they have such a limited range of foods that they kind of lose foods due to burnout. So they're always requesting pancakes or waffles for breakfast and lunch and dinner. They might kind of burn out on those foods. Picky eaters will tolerate new foods on their plate. And they're typically open to trying new foods. And they also have at least one food from each food group. So let's say they eat bananas, but that's the only fruit that they have. And sometimes we'll hear parents say, I think my child is a picky eater, just a picky eater. So that's kind of picky eaters. And then problem feeders. So problem feeders really have a restricted diet, and we call it food jagging. If you're not familiar with that term, that means that a child, for example, pancakes, let's say they're having pancakes constantly for across several meals, across several days, they're at risk for food jagging or eliminating that food from their diet. Sometimes with food jagging, they will allow that pancakes back into their diet after a break. So picky eaters, they'll allow after a break, they'll allow you to serve pancakes again. Problem feeders won't, usually because their diet is so restricted. And then problem feeders will avoid a certain category altogether. So maybe picky eaters will accept carrots as that one vegetable in the category. Problem feeders won't touch vegetables. That's just an example. Not saying all problem feeders won't touch vegetables. I mean, we do see that a lot, but that's just an example. Any questions about picky eaters versus problem eaters? Okay, I'm gonna keep going. So food jagging, I kind of mentioned it, but I'll let Heidi continue talking about it.
Yeah. All right. So Madison already kind of briefly mentioned these kind of points. They demonstrate a period of restricted intake of diet. When a child requests the same set of foods at every meal. I'm only having Cheerios. I only want Honey Nut Cheerios. I only want red apples. I only want green grapes. I don't want the purple grapes. So the example we have written down below is they only want to eat goldfish. So here is kind of why we see these food jagging things happen. So for example of goldfish will remain the same every time that you present it to a child, unless you go and you get maybe the pizza flavored or the Parmesan flavor or the pretzel flavored. But even at that kind of thing, they're still getting the same taste, the same flavor, the same crunch. There's really no diversity within that food in that moment. So it's predictable. They know what to expect when they put it in their mouth when they see it. Whereas fruits, vegetables, meat, they can be presented multiple different ways. So we kind of have bananas. You can have them when they're green. You can have them when they're yellow. You can have them when they start to kind of get overly ripe. And that just it looks different. It tastes different. It can smell different. So these are all different things that can definitely throw us for a loop. And I will attest to this here as a feeding therapist. Like, I definitely no, thank you for the overly ripe bananas. Like, I have my own kind of things. We all have our own kind of things, and that's cool. But those are some ways that we had to think broadly about why might my child not be eating grapes? They always eat grapes, but what's the firmness on the grapes? What's the taste? Is it sweet? Is it sour? Is it a big grape, little grape? All those different kind of tastes that you may experience can definitely be changing that experience for your child. Chicken, we have the example of grilled chicken versus chicken nuggets. A lot of our kids do like chicken nuggets because it's always so predictable. Every time they get one, they know what to expect, whereas a grilled chicken could be grilled maybe too long if you left it on the grill or not enough. So it's chewy, it's dry, so many different variables. So why are we concerned? A child will likely experience a burnout of this food and stop maybe consuming it in their diet, which can be very detrimental to some kids, especially because if that's the one food that they're eating and then they lose it, that's a reduction in their overall like food consumption. Depending on the food, they're losing vitamins and minerals. And you have a higher risk of being underweight and maybe some poor body growth. For example, I had a kiddo the other day who was so sad because Pirate's Booty, he's like, I just ate it too much. I don't love it anymore. So we're taking a break. But we took a break with that food and we gained back a food that we haven't had in a while. So it was really cool to kind of see that. That doesn't always happen like that, but that was really cool. We were able to bring one more food back, even though we lost one that time. And the food we brought back was one that we had lost before. So allowing that variability and seeing the changes that can be made.
So some things that can kind of occur, and you guys, I'm sure, are well aware of this. So it can be stressful for both the child and the caregiver, for parents as well. There might be you might see some negative talk surrounding foods from the child, kind of like, it's icky, yucky, I don't want it. And then there might be some negative associations around the food and meal times. I know with some families too. Ooh, I scrolled. That's not a good idea. Let's see. There we go. Sorry about that. Some things you might see are some power struggles. So they're wanting their preferred, I'm using pancakes as an example. I hope that's okay. They're wanting their preferred pancakes and you're trying to encourage something else for dinner because that's not what you cooked. So there kind of becomes this power struggle too. So these are some things that we can see from picky eating. And then, so our ultimate goal is, according to Kay Toomey, is that children should have at least 30 different foods in their diet. And then we would want, ideally, when you're thinking about like what you should offer your child, ideally we want like 3 different foods for 5 meals and then 3 meals and 2 snacks each day. So I know sometimes some kids, they enjoy just kind of eating whenever they're hungry, but ideally you would want to try to keep in mind having just 3 meals a day with 2 to 3 snacks in between. Another thing you can mention too is like, if your child doesn't eat a lot of their dinner that you presented, let's say it was a new food, you could add an additional 3rd snack at the end of the day. Maybe it's a glass of milk, just so that peace of mind, you know that they've got a little something in their bellies before bed. Just kind of something I like to mention to parents. But you want to make sure that you're not repeating across 2 days, because those repetitions are kind of what lead to kids getting so pigeonholed towards like a certain food. I know this is a lot easier said than done, but this is kind of the ideal, what we try to strive for with picky eating and with our picky kids. So here's some strategies, some things to try at home. So some goals, we want to have a positive relationship with foods. So one way you can do that is through play and kind of using neutral language towards when we're talking about foods. I always like to say, don't yuck someone else's yum. Presenting a variety of foods across different settings. So maybe you're providing still preferred foods, the pancakes at dinner, let's say, then you're also serving a side of hash browns and maybe exposing them to some different protein, like some sausage. Just to kind of expose them to a variety of foods. And then, so I wanted to mention Melanie Potok has she has great resources. And we have it linked at the at the end. We have a slide full of resources, but she has a great tool online. It's a stop sign visual. And so when creating a schedule at home or trying to create a routine, I always encourage families to try to use this stop sign visual, because I know it can be really hard when you're going from maybe you don't really have a schedule at your house and you want to. That change in routine can be really tricky, but using that stop sign visual can kind of help implement the new routine. And she mentions that the first at least 3 days are going to be a little rough trying to implement that routine. But with any child, once they know that this is the new routine, it becomes a lot smoother. So again, this visual on the slide just shows kind of what that 3 meals a day with 2 to 3 snacks kind of looks like. And so creating a routine, maybe every meal you start by doing bubbles. That's kind of what we do here at CI, or we'll kind of wash our hands and we'll have a bowl of warm soapy water just to kind of get our bodies ready for eating. Maybe they help cook the meal at home. That's another idea to kind of help them explore the different components of the meal. And of each food, they get to see it before it's actually cooked. I have been encouraging families lately. There's a lot of kids child safe nights, if your child is able to do that, that they could help kind of, even if it's not something in the meal, they could help kind of cut on the side while you're working to make the meal. Another routine that you could have them do is help set the table. You could do family style serving. They can also help clear and clean up the table. So these are all kind of things that we incorporate here at CI to help kind of carry over into the home setting as well.
Okay, this is like my favorite part, I feel like. So how to increase that food inventory? Start by making small changes to the properties of the food. We'll go over some of these in greater detail later on, so I'm just going to kind of hit on these bullet points and then we'll kind of really dive in. Make changes to only one preferred food at a time. If you start changing all of your child's favorite foods, they're like, whoa, 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 what's going on? I'm not doing any of this. And then we get stuck. So for example, if a child only likes mac and cheese for dinner, maybe instead of using a little Kraft like noodles, we use spaghetti noodles with the Kraft mac and cheese sauce. It's a really great way of being like, hey, the only thing that changed is just the noodle this time, not the flavor, not anything else, just the noodle texture. And then as that progresses, and then you could change the different kind of cheese sauce that you have on top. Or even the shape of the noodle and the sauce. So those are different ways, and we'll dive in even more right now.
And I just want to give one example. I had a mom, super proactive, came to me this week and said, my child didn't eat anything on her plate last night for dinner. And I said, oh, okay, well, tell me, what did you have on the plate? And she listed off the things, and they were all new or non-preferred foods. And so we kind of talked about how, okay, so your child had no safe or preferred foods on her plate. And so think about it, if you were presented with a plate of food that you hadn't had before, or you didn't like if I had a plate with Brussels sprouts on it, I would be really stressed out. And so that's how that child is feeling too, is we don't want to make too many changes at once, because otherwise that's going to increase the stress or anxiety around mealtime. So small changes over a longer course of time is recommended.
Yeah, and I even have like little in-person examples today because I had a feeding client before. We grabbed some things out, so I'm super excited to show you guys. So for example, the use of cookie cutters. Oh, we have little like heart shapes. I have a whole box here of different cookie cutters that you guys can use or you can purchase if you were looking to. I think this is like a bird one, maybe, if you can tell. I don't even know. It's kind of hard to see. It's like a dog bone. they're super fun. We have little like animal picks that you can kind of put in, like grapes or something fun like that. Cookie cutters are really fun to make it a really awesome experience. So from one of my clients, I had 2 brands of chocolate chip granola bars. So I showed her, I said, hey, like you like granola bars, you really like this one. This is a new brand. So I have some cookie cutters and we're gonna have an experiment today. So I took my Sunbelt granola bar, I took my chewy granola bar, and then I'm gonna move you guys down really fast. I made little, oh, doesn't have a topper on it. Made little heart. You can see it down at an angle. Sorry guys, a heart-shaped granola bar. So I presented her with this one. And then the second one that I did the same thing, and she had her eyes closed. And I forewarned her, I said, hey, here's what we're gonna do. Are you open to it? And she said, yep, I sure am. And so then I presented her with the second one. And so as you can kind of see, or maybe as you can kind of tell, that they look very, very similar. And she did a taste test. So we use cookie cutters to change the shape of it. Same, like I said, same food, different brands. Can you tell the difference? So fun way of changing the presentation. And even if your child only likes granola bars in this long rectangle shape, even starting with just cookie cutters, not adding a new brand, but just making it a heart or a circle. That's a huge, huge change for a lot of our kiddos. Like Madison said earlier, using those child-safe knives. My kids get a kick out of it. They like to use the knife and cut it. They like to use little like apple cores, make little caramel apples where it's circular. They like make little holes out of the apples and they dig around in them. That is really fun. Food coloring can be really, really positive too. We make a lot of experiments with yogurt. What does a blue food coloring and a red one make? Oh, it makes purple. Like, this is so cool. Like, watch it change. Taste, you can always add spices, add some saltiness, add some sweetness with sugar. And then that texture aspect. We can add different crumbs to it, like a mac and cheese. Maybe you're adding some breading to it. That's something new for your child to experience, and they're getting that multi-texture experience in their mouth. But that's probably my last change I would make is that texture aspect, because that can be a pretty tricky one to start off with.
And then I just wanted to add also, it's important to include the child's interests when you're doing play. Because, for example, I have an autistic client who loves outer space, and we had little sausage circles and had never eaten sausage before, but how I could get him to maybe explore by taking a bite is by taking a bite so that we could create different moon phases. So that's kind of how an example of using a preferred interest, but still exploring about food and still engaged. And that kept him, he was one that likes to move around. So that's what kind of helped keep him at the table, despite still using like preferred topics of interest, but through exploring foods.
Like we said, make small changes, just noticeable. You don't want to change the whole flavor, look, design of a pizza if that's the only thing that they're going to eat. Like a big change may make a really maybe negative reaction that we don't really want to happen. We want it to be, again, fun, positive, sometimes involving your kiddo. I involve my clients a lot in those changes. It builds a really, really big sense of like self-accomplishment. They're so proud that they did that. So small enough to make it noticeable, but not big enough to create maybe a larger reaction that we were anticipating or maybe didn't need at that point in time. So let's see what's next. Play. I have some really fun examples for you guys, like Madison just talked about, using our client's interests, your kiddo's interests, to make it fun and engaging. Again, I kind of come back to like play is necessary with feeding. So manners come second. So encouraging different things, like can we make animals, can we make cars, how many buildings can we make? I used French toast sticks and we put them in the microwave. We made mustaches. We made hats before. I've made Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse with my clients. And we might not be even eating. So here's some examples. The pancake example, my client will eat pancakes here, but she doesn't like to eat them at home. So I said, hey, like at home, you probably had chocolate chips. We have Nutella, things that we've already been eating. So I said, let's make it a person. She's like, awesome, did it. She came in today and she's like, guess what, Miss Heidi? I had a pancake with chocolate chips on it for breakfast. Huge win. So awesome. Great. The next two pictures are of a house in Santa and his reindeers. This client, when we started, we did not like anything on our fingers. Stickiness was not great. We were very limited in our foods. We were playing with frosting, like graham crackers. All of these are like more so preferred food. There's little caramel bites that are little circles on the ground that he smushed. That was maybe a newer food that we were exploring and playing with. And I'm like, I'm going to challenge you to do this. Did it by himself then afterwards. Let's see, there are some fruit snacks up there. So that is a really fun way to like play. And another tidbit of this is like, you can do this at the dinner table, but if you can take a time where it's like a snack, where it's not feeling that overwhelming maybe pressure of like, I have to eat dinner right now, or I have to eat lunch. A snack time is a perfect time to work on just playing with your foods. Definitely incorporate them into lunch and dinner and breakfast if you can, but especially for the younger kiddos, if you have like a snack time, play with your foods. What can you build? What can you make? So those are some fun things to do. And then similar on the same lines of deconstructing and reconstructing. So foods like tacos. Something that we can do is you can have them deconstruct the taco that you've already made. So they can pull apart like the meat or the cheese and put them in kind of piles to see what's all there. And sometimes at that point, I'm okay with letting them eat in those piles because the food's all kind of already touched. Going back to the mixed texture, tacos, there's a lot of different things in there. There's a chewy substance. There's a tomatoes, maybe could be crunchy. The meat, chicken could be a different kind of texture too. So there's a at that time. And then on the opposite side of that, if you are able to, different things that you can have your child construct would be like a lasagna or spaghetti. Having the noodles separate and the sauce separate and the meatballs separate and the cheese separate. How can they make it themselves? How much sauce do they want to put on top of it? Similar to like a burrito or tacos or pizza, like how much sauce do you want on your pizza? How much cheese do you want? Do you want any cheese? What kind of toppings do you want? Do you want a lot or a little? This allows them to feel like they have a sense of control, which is good. You're giving them those options and then they get to pick, all right, like here are the things I need on there. How much do I want? And it gives them that sense of control that maybe makes them feel a little bit more at ease of, I can do this by myself kind of thing. So fun ways to add it in there. Like I said, here are just some options. Everyone tries the spaghetti one at the table, but that's a fun one to say, like, hey, here we go. Everyone's having plain spaghetti. You take what you want, add the sauce, add the meatballs, add the cheese. Taco bars are great because they can add as much or as little as they want. And there's options there for them to pick from.
Okay, so One thing we're going to talk about is you can language. So I even notice myself when I'm talking to kids, I will find myself asking them questions like, can you take a small bite? Or can we just try this, please? So I'm just going to recommend that we switch to more of like you can language. So it kind of empowers them, and it also kind of takes away that choice too. Like you're not asking them, can you go put your shoes on? They're going to say no, right? It's giving them that option to kind of opt out. Whereas like you're giving them different ideas of what you can do with the food. So for example, let's say I was exploring with broccoli. Let's see, I can bring it to my lips. I can lick it. Let's make a tree. You could make a tree with it. So you're giving them ideas of how they could explore with the food. It also it gives them a sense of control, because then they're able to choose how they want to explore with the food. And then it usually kind of takes that stress component out, because you're giving them choices. And so there's not this big stress, like I need to take a bite. You're kind of taking a step back. So kind of we recommend switching from can you to you can language during exploring. Okay, so a learning plate. Oh,
Can I jump back to that?
Of course.
Really fast?
Yep.
On that you can aspect, I think it's also really important to know your child in those moments, and knowing how far and when to push them past. So like, oh, we're always licking the food. Like, all right, now you can hold it in your teeth, or you can close your mouth, like put it in your mouth and close it. So giving them like, keep increasing those options of how you're exploring it, to keep advancing their skills. We don't want to keep them, we don't want them to plateau. I just feel like you can put it to your cheek, you can put it to your cheek for like, let's say 2 weeks in a row. We want to say, okay, let's get a little bit closer to our mouth and gain that comfortability. So just always trying to progress by knowing where they're at. It may take 2 weeks to get to the mouth. That's okay. But we want to kind of continue to build and increase that confidence.
Because kids are smart. And so if you're always going to give them the option to smell, they're just going to smell it instead of actually challenging, So you always, like Heidi's mentioned, you always want to kind of try to increase the demand just slightly, meet them where they're at. So a learning plate. I like to use a paper plate, but it could be any kind of plate that you have at your house. So this is considered a safe zone for your child. This is where maybe I would start introducing new foods or non-preferred foods. So instead of having it on their plate, you would start with a learning plate. So let's say my child, I'll use broccoli again, hasn't been accepting broccoli, and I would like them to explore with it more. I might put it on the learning plate to start, and then seeing if they can from there accept it on their own plate. Maybe they'll grab a small piece and put it on their plate, or maybe they'll explore it from the learning plate. This is just considered a safe, neutral zone. Again, it takes away some of that stress about having it on their plate. Because some kids you might see, they'll take it off their plate, they'll throw it, they'll put it on the ground. That's their way of communicating that they're not okay with it yet on their plate.
Along that same line too, you might be going into this of like, oh, my kid's throwing food off the table. Something that I like to do, and was kind of talked about at the K to me, it's some of her philosophy is as well, like having the kid then go back up and pick up the food off the ground, and like, you don't have to have it on your plate, but you could have it on the table. You could have it outside of your range, or you could have it on the learning plate. Just to kind of reinforce like, oh, like food does stay on the table right now. But we can have it in a safe spot. You don't have to bring it anywhere near us, but it can stay over here.
Cooking and baking is another great way to kind of explore with foods, and also kind of a good, if you're wanting your child to participate more in cooking, baking is a kind of a good way to start. There's a lot of things that they can help out with. And you're exposing them to so many different smells and textures, and they love to stir and help out. I know one family I see, they love to do experiments with foods. And so they'll make different potions, and the child gets to cut up and add things. Now, he's not eating any of these, but that's okay. That time is strictly for exploring, and he's getting exposed, and he's still touching all of those foods, which is a step towards getting it closer to our mouth, which is then closer to eating it. Okay. So engaging during mealtime. One thing we kind of want to encourage is sitting at the table as a family. I know it can be hard. Another thing that's tricky is TV. Having the TV off is also encouraged, just because we want the child to be focused on what the task is at hand, which is eating their meal, right? So any sort of distractions, we want to kind of limit those, and we encourage kind of one meal, one family sitting together as a family and kind of engaging together. Maybe you're talking about the foods that are on your plate. Maybe you're talking about your day, but kind of focus the conversation if possible on the foods that you're eating, especially if these are kids that are maybe a little bit more picky eaters and are having a hard time accepting different foods, focusing on like the different properties of the food. Like, oh, I think this pepper smells sweet. I think I'm going to explore by licking it, and kind of focusing conversation on that. And then you also want to encourage, you can use positive reinforcement. So for example, ooh, after we're done exploring, we get dessert. And then also making sure that you're eating with your child. That's kind of an important one, because you're modeling that you're also eating those foods too. And then they're more likely to take a bite or try something if they see that you're doing that too.
Well, we have a question.
Oh,
Any tips? Great question, Stephanie. Are there any tips if you have multiple kids that struggle, how to
great
balance it
question.
at the table together? Yes. Again, I think I like challenges. So what if my client sometimes will have a challenge like, oh, who can do this or who can do that? Who can do this the longest, and kind of see who can do it longer. I think that is kind of helpful. And I think too, encouraging me like, oh, like Johnny did this, like, let's see what we can do. And we all have our own preferences, of course, too. Like we're not always in like every single food that's presented to us. Even as adults, we don't do that. So I think too, just like encouraging that exploration between all of them, and knowing like, oh, that's okay, but if Johnny doesn't like peas, we like peas. Let's see how we can help Johnny eat his peas. I'm asking you any other tips too.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I've had families that it's like this. And so they usually will do like one learning plate for the family. And Heidi's going to kind of go into like family style serving, but you can also go around the table. Like maybe you all explore with that. You explore with broccoli. How is Johnny going to explore with broccoli? Oh, he picked smelling. Susie's going to pick licking. Oh, let's rate the scale. I felt like it was okay for me. Broccoli was just so. And maybe Johnny says, oh, I think it was great. But Susie's like, it was yuck. And then you can kind of use that opportunity to say, oh, but your brother liked it. Let's not yuck someone else's yum. Okay. So kind of turning it into like a family engagement. I know you're probably thinking that this is a lot easier said than done, and we totally understand. But we're just giving you ideas, something to try at home too.
Another idea.
Yeah.
Oh, I know what it was. Even as an adult having a learning plate, sometimes I think, again, if there are foods that are presented that we don't always love, letting our kids know, like, I'm still learning about this food. It's not my favorite food right now, but I'm going to keep trying. And I'm still going to keep exploring, because then we're all looking at, okay, not all of us like the same foods, and that's okay, but we're also going to learn and explore together, similar to having just the one.
I'm sorry, Heidi. I don't know if we've mentioned this, but Heidi brought up a good point. Continuing to try presenting foods in different ways. So for example, I always give the example of Brussels sprouts to kids. I say, Miss Maddie feels like they're just okay. I just feel okay about those foods, but I need to keep trying them in different ways. And I tried them recently roasted with bacon on top, and they were so yum. So kind of giving them examples about how, like, I've tried them roasted plain, I tried them boiled, tried them all these different ways, and I finally found an example that I liked. So think about ways you're presenting foods at home and seeing if there's ways that you can change them, because kids need multiple opportunities to explore with foods before they decide if they like it or not. I don't know if we've mentioned that, but I felt like that was important.
Yes, good point. Family style serving and family meals. This is one of my favorite kind of takeaway tips too. If you're able to, this is a really fun time. Again, for everyone to sit down together, but something at family style meals, especially when you have multiple children, is who is going to be like the server tonight. You can kind of make it like a restaurant base. Like, all right, Johnny is going to serve everybody's noodles tonight for having pasta. And Susie's going to put bread on everybody's plate. And Joey is going to put the sauce on top. And Johnny's going to let know when to stop putting that sauce on. And so that is getting everyone to kind of engage in that meal together. Again, and saying how much or how little they want. So this is a really fun way of getting that exposure to multiple different foods and putting on your plate how much you think you can handle that day. So that is always a really great thing of like, all right, like we have a new food. You only need to put on like a teaspoon compared to a cup of pasta. So different ways to kind of think through that. And as they gain their confidence and they like the foods, then they make a bigger serving of it. So it's fun to see those little progressions. So restaurants are fun ways to kind of incorporate that, like at home restaurants. I've made McDonald's, I've made Dairy Queen, made all sorts of restaurants in the clinic. And I'll allow my client to be like, all right, what can I get you? And they served it, was so engaging. And they touched everything that I asked them to touch that day, which is beautiful. So a recap of steps: building positive relationships, establishing a routine, engage with your child, engage your child within those foods, meet your child where he or she is at with each of those foods, and just make small changes to those foods. And another thing that I don't think we talked about, Madison, is when they do make those really big wins, as hard as it is, not to want to, or to celebrate, not to want to celebrate those things. It's, you make a big woohoo, it startles them and they're like, oh my goodness, what was that? And I have made done that before. And then the next time my client is like, I'm not touching that again. Like, you got excited. No way, I'm not doing that. So then we've taken a few steps back. So if they start to accept that change, great. You can get them like, oh, cool, I see that you're eating, or you tried this. Awesome. What'd you think of it? But leaving it very like, good, awesome job. Very, what's what I'm looking for? Just kind of
neutral language.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. It will do a lot of great things. All right. And our ultimate take-home tip is start small. Try to incorporate one or two of these strategies to support feeding at home. Starting small with one change will help decrease stress on you guys and your child. So just implementing a feeding schedule can be one little thing that you guys can try. And you can make that schedule what you need it to make for your family and what works for you guys.
Yeah, we encourage just starting small with one step, because we don't want you to become overwhelmed or the child. And if we make so many changes at once, that's going to cause stress.
Yeah, and then we have our resources. So my munch bug is Melanie Paddock's website with a whole bunch of really great resources. That is where the mealtime routine came from that Madison had shared earlier.
The stop sign visual.
Yep.
She has a lot of different blog posts about mealtime strategies and suggestions for our picky eaters.
Playing at your plate, or Play at Your Plate is an Instagram resource to use. Does a really, really great job talking about different hard Lunchables, different ways to feed multiple children at various ages, and how to incorporate play and experiences and cooking and baking with them. And then the SOS approach to feeding, that is also problem feeders versus picky eaters. So there's that resource as well. And then I believe next we have that equipment. So we have linked here the cookie cutters that I kind of showed you guys tonight, as well as some child safe knives that we use in the clinic with our kiddos.
And here are references, things that we pulled from for today's presentation.
And our information. Like I said, we will make sure you guys get a PDF of these files, or of these slides in the presentation. So if you need to contact us, feel free. We're always around. Our website is also there too, in case you are interested in pursuing some feeding services. Do we have any last minute questions? Anything we can clarify? No?
When we mentioned picky eaters about how we would want them to have at least 30 foods, that would be kind of our criteria. If you were curious, like, I'm not sure if my child would benefit from food school or feeding therapy, that's kind of the criteria that we kind of look at when we're referring a child.
Oh, Rebecca, great question. Can you maybe give a little bit? I am curious to know if it's pocketing because are we chewing any foods at all? Or is it more so
like unpreferred foods?
Hi. Yeah, so the child, she will chew the foods and then hold them in her like in the side of her mouth with like mainly meals, fruits, vegetables, but with junk food like snacks, chips, and stuff like that. She will fully chew and swallow it.
That is a great question.
Mhm.
And otherwise everything else is swallowing. She'll swallow.
Yeah, like chips and cookies and fruit snacks, stuff like that. She chews and fully swallows it. But like a meal, like the example that the family gave today was a chicken strip. She had it chewed up and it was sitting in the side of her mouth for like more than a half hour.
Oh, Madison, do you have any good tips for that one? I have not experienced that. I have a suggestion, but I'm gonna let see if Madison has an idea first.
I'm wondering, is she aware, kind of that oral motor, like, is she aware that it's pocketing? So sometimes I've recommended to families taking like kind of like a vibrating toothbrush and kind of do it like a little bit before bed, spending some time while you're brushing teeth, going along the gums, like the back of the toothbrush, just to kind of get more awareness to those areas where she's pocketing, because maybe she's not, I'm that's just a suggestion. I'm wondering, like, is she not like aware? Because some kids, they don't know that they're pocketing, they don't feel it there. And so we kind of have to kind of, what were you gonna say, Heidi?
And is it one side or is it both sides? Like
Yes.
that's sort of big into like, is she like pocketing on the right side versus the left side? Again, I've taken like the Z Vibe and I have helped my kiddo with some chewing stuff. So I put the Z Vibe baby or a chewy tube in like their cheek. So we help them work on chew, 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 then swallow. And maybe even giving those verbal cues of like, all right, we're gonna chew, 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 and then we're gonna swallow right away. I've also got to put my finger there so I'm slightly inhibiting this as well sometimes. Again, things that I've tried, not always, everything's different for every kid, so could definitely change.
Sorry,
And-
lots of questions. I love all these
Yeah.
questions. Never too old for feeding therapy. One of my oldest clients is 17. So it really, you're thinking of like quality of life, right? So they're never too old to come in for feeding therapy. Just looking at that criteria, like, do they have 30 foods or not? Are they having like the same consistent foods in their diet? And then one last thing about pocketing, I was just curious, you could also cue, I don't know if you mentioned this, Heidi, but cue at the end of meals, if she's old enough to kind of say like, hey, okay, we're done with dinner. Great, let's check the sides of our cheeks. Let's go take our tongue and go, and really like kind of cue and make that part of the mealtime routine so that you kind of have that safety awareness, like, okay, I know she cleared her mouth at the end of the meal. And also it gets her to start that as a routine and more that awareness.
Amy, where can you find someone? We have locations here. We have, oh goodness, like 10. If you were interested, you can ask for a consult. We do some telehealth services as well. So that can always be an option if you're unable to get into one of our current clinics. Otherwise, if you're from a different area, feel free to shoot me an email and maybe I can help problem solve where to go. If we can't kind of support right here. So we'll love to support with that. Are you from the Madison area by chance, Amy? Maribou. So, okay, I'm not originally from Wisconsin, but that's like near like Wanakee, isn't it?
That's totally fine. We have a clinic in Wanakee and Middleton. So that's kind of our nearest location to that area. But yeah.
But even if you come in for a eval, telehealth is always an option to work on. And that's even great too, to be able to take some of our strategies that we're doing and doing it right in the home environment can be really helpful sometimes.
It was a great option over COVID times because it got the families working, participating in this feeding therapy session. And then we got to they were in their kitchen cooking hands-on. So it actually worked well.
Stephanie, are you thinking in terms of like, yes, we don't have cold classes, but we usually really try to have those conversations at the end or throughout our sessions of like, hey, here's what we did and here's how you can do it at home, or here's how you can try it at home. Sometimes go ahead, Madison.
I was just gonna say, I like to give families, I don't want to overwhelm them. So I'll give them one thing that they can work on over the next week before I see them again. One thing to try, one change to make. Sometimes we do have parents come and join us for the session if they're able, if they're not like busy. That way, because it is parent education, that is a big part of feeding, because that's where we're going to see the carryover outside of therapy, and that's where we're going to see progress. Is when parents kind of are willing to carry over and try these things at home. That's when we're going to see progress.
And sometimes go ahead.
No, and I was just going to say, so my son does feeding therapy at CI on McKee, and he's been doing it for like 4 months, and he's doing amazing. Like, I mean, I'm very impressed. And one thing that it's at the end of the session, they always say, okay, we worked on this. This is what you can do this week at home. And that's been so helpful because it's kind of like consistency. And then we go back and he's trying something else. And he's 3. He hasn't done that in his whole life until now. So it is helpful to know what to do at home.
And
so, yeah.
I mean, I was gonna say too, our McKee location has like a double-sided mirror. So parents can come and watch, and the kids don't know that you're there until they get old. Like, I can see them out there. Otherwise, I have also thought about doing some videotaping in sessions and getting a flash drive to send home to parents. Like, here's what we did. Here's how you can maybe model and see what they did here and there. So
a lot of families the reason why we might not have a parent join is maybe we'll the child if the parent doesn't join. I love when the parent's like, he ate what during the session. And that's kind of common too, is it's a new environment. So they're more willing to try something. You know, they're used to at home in that setting that they're familiar with. They've already refused a few food maybe or exploring it. So we'll find sometimes that a child is more willing to accept foods first in food school, and then gradually they're willing to try it at home too. Any other questions? These are great questions. Great question. So what is a good break time with food jagging? I want to say 2 weeks. Heidi, I think it depends also on the child. Maybe you try after 2 weeks, and if you're still seeing a pushback, you might need a longer break. Heidi, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would say if you're seeing a pushback right away, I sometimes like hold it out, or I try, if it's a food that can be adjusted, I try to present it in a different way. Maybe if it's like a cinnamon toast crunch, I'm gonna give them cinnamon and sugar toast. To see if it's just the look of it, or if it's every part of that food is not what we're looking for. Again, it's going to be very, very client specific of what is best in terms of that kid in that moment. I will try to present different foods. If a parent's like, oh, they stopped this food, I'm like, well, see if I can get them and look at it or eat it, or not eat it, but like explore with it. Sometimes it's a go, and sometimes it's we just need maybe a month off before we re-present that food. Sensory-based strategies for a child who is 23 months and only accepting liquids. I would say, have you tried any like freezing those liquids, like a silicone straw? What is swallow like? Is it purely just sensory, or is there some oral motor going on there too? Oh, I think we're frozen, Anna.
I know. Oh no.
I'm gonna try to respond to this depending on my internet connection.
Sounds good.
Perfect.
It is purely sensory.
How does the child do with like play? So no pressure on eating, only drink from a bottle. I was curious about that. Like let's say you've got him in the high chair or whatever your setting is, and the food is presented. Is he or she curious at all about like bringing it to the mouth or like dipping his or her fingers in it? Any interest?
Will he play with this? Will he play with a silicone straw at all? Sometimes I like to use a silicone. So sometimes I like to use a silicone straw just for play, not even to drink, but to play with it first and to put it in our mouth or chew on it potentially. And then I add a liquid to it. Have they tried to add a bottle top to a different like base essentially? Or like changing some sort of that, and or have they thought about changing, is it thin liquids or thick liquids? The next question. One bottle. Because I would almost say if you can start to thicken the liquids a little bit,
ever so slightly.
Then you can maybe start to cut the tip of that the nipple off of the bottle, and then it's gonna allow that that change to naturally happen to get those liquids. Have they tried smoothies? I'm gonna guess no.
Or Pediasure,
Yeah, good one.
Yep.
because she's describing my son. This was my son. That's why I'm like, oh yeah, we had to move to Pediasure. So that way he could, and then from there we were able to do smoothies and slowly. Yeah.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yep. Especially with the gaining weight.
Yeah. So
That
if
becomes-
he drinks milk, I would definitely, I mean, I'm not a doctor, but Pediasure would be a good, maybe to try because it has so many nutrients.
Yeah.
One thing I have found with Pediasure that's kind of, you got to be careful with, it's a great like bridge, but when like I have a client, he's 3 and still only wants Pediasure. And so it's kind of become a crutch. And so knowing when to take a step back from Pediasure, and now this week he has been off it all week. But so what could happen is if he's having it consistently, or if they're having it consistently, it's filling their tummies and then they're not wanting to explore at meal times. So just keeping mindful of that, is that if you're filling your child up with nutrients, then they're not going to want to explore with the foods that you provided. So just something to keep in mind, but it's a great resource and great tool.
I have a
Let's see.
question just in relation to that. What, like, something I tried was like pouring his milk from the bottle into like a bowl and then trying to see if he would take it with a spoon. Oh, she has another question, but that's just another thing we tried and it worked too eventually. So
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah.
Food training can be very helpful. How old is this client? 23 months. Duh. I'm sorry. It's 7 o'clock tonight. I am sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah, definitely can try it. I've only really used it with my older clients, because they're able to kind of see the differences that we were making. So you could definitely go ahead, Madison.
I'm wondering, like, comprehension, like also engagement. If it's a busy kiddo, is he really going to understand what you're trying to teach him, the important things that you're trying to teach him? But kind of goes back to, if he's busy, kind of maybe you start small and you have a goal of like 5 minutes. We're just trying to sit at the high chair for 5 minutes and kind of start slow that way. Not having that expectation of a 30-minute meal. That's way too high, especially for a busy little guy. Making sure he's supported. Maybe he's like uncomfortable going back to that, like, I've had like dish towels, maybe he's slouching too much. And so it kind of propping the child up using like different towels behind, just keeping in mind that like optimal seating position.
I have, do you do a lot of sensory input prior to like vestibular and probe? You do. Do you ever, okay. Have you ever used a Z-Bag with him? Like, and use a Z-Bag with his mouth and on his chin and like putting things. Got it. How about a vibrating toothbrush though?
Be tricky.
If they have that. Okay.
We can also brainstorm too. You have our email too, so feel free, Anna. You can always email us too, with more questions too. We are here to help. These are great. Sounds like a tricky case when that happens. See any other?
Wow.
Yeah.
Fun and tricky. Love it.
I've even had like changing like the water flavor a little bit, or even like dipping the bottle, or if they have a chewy, what are those called? I'm blanking at 7:30. The like chewy stick. It's like a tea. What am I thinking of? Anyways, if they have like a chewy thing that they always chew on, let's say, seeking that movement or that oral, if they're an oral seeker, kind of dipping it in applesauce and then like trying to get some, maybe you dab it on their lip and then they lick it. And that's kind of how you don't want to pressure that, but if they're open to it, kind of maybe that's how they're going to get interested. Oh, that's really sweet. Sweet things are a good thing to try too. Okay, any other questions?
Awesome.
That's great.
We will send the presentation to you. If you want to send the video our way, that'd be awesome. But thank you guys for allowing us to pop in today. It was a blast. Hopefully